Hello, welcome to the Sedgwick Podcast. I'm Jonathan Mast, and once again we have a very interesting topic and a great subject matter from Sedgwick. We're going to be talking about the emerging risk in media and entertainment and the types of losses that our team here at Sedgwick deal with. And we have our subject matter expert, Alex Nicoll, Director and Head of Entertainment and Media for Sedgwick, based in London. Alex, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I think this is another one of those topics that people will be very surprised to learn that, within the Sedgwick organization, that we deal with something like this, that we have experts who can handle and specialize in such I'm sure what many people see as extremely glamorous and exciting. So I don't know, you might be looking for a lot of job applications flowing in soon for your team. And so tell us just a little bit about your background and how you got into this business before we kick off with the very first question.
Yeah, sure. How long have you got? I'll try and give you the abridged version. So I spent the last kind of 20 years really working in and out of the film and TV industry in the UK. I also spent a lot of time in the US, mainly California. So I began my career as a lawyer. We have a different system over here. I was a barrister, so the guys and the girls in the wigs and the gowns. That then got me into Hiscox, with the insurance company, and I started a career as an underwriter, a media underwriter, specializing in errors and omissions, which is protecting against things like copyright infringement and breach of IP and that type of stuff. I then became involved in production insurance, and through a story that's way too long to tell, I ended up moving to Los Angeles to attend the Los Angeles Film School at the time, which was way back in I think 2000. And it was an intensive course. You were trained by filmmakers, not necessarily teachers. So like my editing teacher, for example, he was the guy that cut Easy Rider, a guy called Don Camburn. Richard Wenk was one of my directing and writing teachers. He wrote 16 Blocks with Bruce Willis. So it was a real kind of cutting edge school at the time. It was very intensive, a year's course. On the back of that, I got a work visa. I think it was a 5-year work visa at the time, and I stayed in the US during that period, and we set up a little company. We were doing music videos and short form commercials, videos and short films, won some awards and all of that good stuff. And we ended up moving into documentaries. I came back to the UK, went into live broadcast television, did some stuff with some companies that you guys will probably recognize, Sky, for example, and Fox. And then basically it's an interesting industry because it's there's a lot of freelancers out there, which I was, and it's pretty much feast or famine. So you can work, do really well, and then you can have long periods of time where you're not working, trying to find work, developing projects, that type of stuff. I'm quite entrepreneurial, so there was a bit of that didn't really sit too well with me. I ended up getting pulled back into insurance as a broker for a company, a well-known company in the UK that's now part of the Howdens Group, and ended up kind of being in and out of the industry until just before COVID. I was back in the US. I was producing with some friends of mine. We had a project with Netflix. We had another project that was being looked at by Fox. Things were going really, really well. And then this pandemic came along and kind of ruined everything. So I got pulled into the UK government. There's a department in the UK government called the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And they'd set up, or were setting up, they couldn't call it insurance, but it was a discretionary compensation scheme that was being set up to protect the UK film and television industry from the ravages of COVID. Basically, when COVID came along, all the insurers rightly pulled out of the market. They couldn't sustain the losses, and it became a government initiative to protect and ring fence the industry. So the government stepped in, and they were looking for individuals that could kind of bridge a gap between the film and TV industry, government, and the insurance industry. And they needed someone that understood insurance, law, film and TV production, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was looking for work, trying to think about what on earth was going to happen. Everything had kind of collapsed, and then next thing I know, I'm involved in a £500 million government insurance project, which was probably the most fascinating and terrifying time of all of our lives, really. We ended up saving 100,000 jobs. We protected over 1,000 productions, and put a lot of money back into the UK film and TV economy, and basically it kind of kept the whole thing going, really, whereas in most other countries in the world, production just stopped. That then led me to a career as a loss adjuster. I then was pretty much headhunted by another company to join them. And then late last year, Sedgwick reached out, and they asked me if I would consider heading up their media and entertainment division, which when I saw what they wanted to do, and when I spoke to them and understood a bit more about the company and their ethos and everything else, it was a no-brainer. I was all in. So that's the really short version. I hope that's helpful.
It's fascinating, and thank you. As a U.S. colleague, I enjoy watching BritBox, so I'm glad that that the jobs in television were saved.
You're welcome.
It's all very good. So we thank you. So going with that, and you've kind of set the stage, but what types of losses did media and entertainment see here at Sedgwick? I mean, I don't think a lot of people think about that field needing this kind of work. So what are you looking at with your team?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's a pretty broad spectrum of feature film, television, advertising, video games, sport, motorsport, theatre, and contingency claims. So these kind of typically range from big Hollywood blockbusters to, big summer music festivals, and then everything in between. So typically, the type of thing we'd see could be anything from, let's say, stolen or damaged technical equipment, right? So like lighting rigs, cameras, even festival trackway, that goes missing, all the way up to, cast and crew injuries, where, basically a production has to stop filming, because the cast member or the key crew member isn't available, and it causes a delay. So on the contingency side, so the live events and the festivals and that, we tend to see similar types of things, but instead of sort of cast and crew injuries, more along the lines of, although that can happen, obviously, but it's more non-appearance of musicians, and then obviously the business interruption that flows from that. So, for example, if a festival or a live event is cancelled and has to be rescheduled to another time. We're also seeing more atypical weather events as well, and I think that's unsurprising. It's just a sign of the times. So, without going into too many details, freak storms, for example, that come out of the middle of nowhere and wipe out a production unit base or destroy sets and damage props and that type of stuff.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I know a year or two ago there was as you say, an unexpected hailstorm at Red Rock Canyon at a concert outdoors, and people were hurt, and I'm sure that a lot of stage equipment was battered to pieces. So that helps a lot in us understanding what exactly is film and television production insurance, and what does it typically cover? Because again, I think people are they're watching a TV show or a movie, and they're just, they think there's millions and millions of dollars, and somebody gets hurt, and somebody just peels off some hundreds and says, here, go to the hospital. And we know that's not how it works.
No, I mean, so generally speaking, film and TV insurance or entertainment insurance, production insurance. It's basically an insurance product that's specifically tailored to the needs of a film and TV production, for example. And it usually provides coverage for the sort of the various risks and liabilities that you would associate with the production process. So there's a general format for the policies that I can run you through. I mean, usually these are usually one-off policies for a specific production, like a policy for a film or a policy for a series of television shows. But they can also be a blanket policy as well. So that would usually be in the case of a broadcaster or a streamer or a studio, or even a large production company kind of undertaking multiple projects over a given period of time, right? So like 1 year, 3 years, and so on. And in those cases, the limits tend to be on a sliding scale depending on the budget and the genre. You tend to see that a lot with the US studios, for example. So, I mean, typically the types of cover that you'd find under these policies. So property damage, so damage to equipment, damage to sets, wardrobes, props, other physical property used during the production. And that can also extend to damage to filming locations as well. Liability insurance, so claims for bodily injury or property damage that occur during the production process. So let's say someone's injured on set, for example, a bystander. Errors and omissions, I touched on that earlier on. So that's basically protects you against claims for defamation, infringement of intellectual property rights. This coverage, this is interesting because this is really important if you're producing something that's using copywritten material, obviously. So anything depicting real people or anything that involves a controversial subject matter, you're going to want to make sure that's in place. Cast insurance, I mentioned that earlier on. So that's basically, it covers the production for the financial losses that kind of stem from any delay or interruption caused by injury, an illness, or God forbid, a death of key cast members. So these people, and crew as well, but they have to be declared to the insurers. Production interruption, again, financial losses, so BI, business interruption. Extra expense, which basically covers you for the additional costs that you incur to complete a production in the event of any sort of unexpected delay or budget overruns. Weather insurance, we've touched on that. Equipment insurance, again, so if you have to repair or replace something that's been damaged or stolen, again, lighting rigs, camera gear, sound equipment, and then the usual stuff, third-party property damage, employees' liability, money, so if money goes missing, stolen, and then there's some policies also offer motor insurance, so to cover production vehicles, so what you guys would call like auto insurance, also terrorism. Terrorism insurance can be put on there. They can be bespoke. I mean, I think that's the kind of general gist of it, but no two projects are the same, right? So the coverage options and the limits tend to vary depending on the particular insurance provider, the size of the project, the scope of the production. So producers and broadcasters and studios now typically work very closely with specialist media insurance brokers, and they tend to customize the policies to meet their specific needs and budget ultimately. But that's the kind of general broad stroke overview of the types of cover that you'd find in a typical film and TV production policy.
Definitely a lot of layers and a wide range. Again, typical person's probably not thinking about that. But this next question is pretty much seems like the only thing all of us are talking about in whatever industry or job we're in. And when we're talking about emerging technologies such as AI, that played a particular role here recently in the Writers Guild of America strike and the Screen Actors Union, the SAG, that delayed television production and movie production and other things. Has there been an impact on production insurance as a consequence? How is that being factored in? What are we looking at in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the strikes have had a massive impact on the film and TV industry globally, but especially here in the UK. Because, I mean, touching on what we kind of talked about earlier on, the UK industry has been hit with multiple issues, right? And they precede the strike. So we had Brexit, which caused a lot of issues in terms of, staffing, especially for, crew on sets. And then, of course, COVID. And I think the combined effect of Brexit, COVID, and now the SAG and WGA strikes have caused some serious damage. It's ironic, really, because in the UK, the industry had really started to bounce back after COVID. Like I said, and I think part of that was due to the restart scheme. But, the staff and skill shortages here have really upset everything. I mean, essentially what's happened is all of the big ticket films and all of the high-end television in the UK, pretty much stopped for around about 6 months initially. During that time, the major studios and streamers and broadcasters actually just took a long, hard look at their business models. And I think the thought process was, or is, that if they're going to pay, the writers more, then they're going to ensure that the quality that they're putting out reflects that, right? So a lot of projects went into turnaround, and some were dropped altogether. I think, you've got to remember, before the strikes, you had the $200-300 million blockbuster flops, essentially. And I think they're in the decline now because it's not a sustainable model and the market's changed. So the net effect of all this is you've got a huge bottleneck now, with productions genuinely only now starting to ramp up, and it's March. So that's concerning. I was reading the BFI, the British Film Institute's report came out last month, and that basically said that spending on film and high-end television production in the UK dropped by 35% in 2023, and that's unprecedented. So, and that's largely due to the US strikes, by the way. So, unlike the post-COVID boom that we saw, there hasn't been the same momentum following the end of the strikes, and things just haven't come flooding back. We were expecting the rubber band to stretch and then break and ping back, but that hasn't happened yet. It could be that it's too soon, and it could be for a lot of other things, right? I mean, there's inflationary pressures going on at the moment. It's two very big elections going on this year. There's a lot of stuff financially going on in the world. AI, and also, they're also putting new contractual terms into the UK crew union BEC2 into their contracts as well. So there's a lot going on, and I think on top of that, like I said, studios have had a lot of time to think about what they're doing, think about their business models, and think about the type of projects that they want to work on. But I think either way, the production slowdown is going to have a serious knock-on effect because there's going to be a lack of content, and the lack of content means there's a lack of things to distribute. Because in reality, what we're now looking at is that 6 months shutdown is in reality a sort of a 9-month shutdown because things are only now starting to come online. So the truth of it is, during that time, there wasn't a lot to insure. And I've also, read articles and heard people say that they think that the knock-on effect of the strike is going to be twice as bad as the pandemic, and that it could take up to 2 years to get things back to where they were. So on top of that, you've got streamers and broadcasters trying to hold on to viewers and viewing figures. And obviously, this lack of new content coming online is frightening them. So I think what's actually going to happen is the pressure to deliver for these producers and these projects when they come online, which better be now, is going to be intense because, there is a demand to get that content on air, because otherwise, very big organizations are going to have to start, rerunning shows. And Netflix and Amazon certainly don't want to be doing that. So if you look at what's going on, and there's the pressure to deliver in potentially unreasonable timeframes, with a skill shortage in the UK and a staff shortage in the UK, you put that together, and there is a genuine risk that people are going to make mistakes because they're going to cut corners. Things are going to be on an unrealistic time frame, and I actually expect this to be a very busy year for us. In terms of the actual impact of the strikes on insurance, so generally speaking, these types of strikes are usually excluded, and for good reason. So in terms of a direct impact on how policies are written or rewritten, I don't think we're going to see that. But the strikes will probably have an impact on non-strike related claims, and insurers are going to have to unpack that and figure that out. I suppose from a risk point of view, the bottleneck caused by the rush back into production is ultimately just going to squeeze the industry further, like I said. And I think people are going to be making mistakes. There's not going to be enough equipment. Studio space is coming online, thank God, but you need the people in there to service it, and there is a serious talent shortage in the UK. So I think the overall impact is going to be greater risk exposure across the board. Now, regardless of this, obviously productions have got to implement risk management strategies, and they've got to, look to minimise their exposure, look at their contingency planning, their scheduling flexibility, whether there's alternate financing arrangements, negotiating force majeure contracts, all that type of stuff. So, that's where we come in. And one of the things that I'm conscious of is that we all need to be more joined up. The producers, the brokers, the insurers, the loss adjusters, engaging in closer communication and collaboration with these people, and making sure that that any potential impact for strike or non-strike risk, excluded or otherwise, that we're all on the same page. So, contingency planning, risk management. I think that's the way we get ahead of this. And we've just got to work closely, and production has got to keep doing what they're doing and make sure that they're buttoned up and they're working with the right people. And then ask me again in a year's time, I think, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, we certainly want to do that, and I think you touched on some of it, but just as we close out, are there any other emerging risks that people should be thinking about? And as far as Sedgwick goes, we're there. How can we help people meet them where they're at with your team and our other resources?
Yeah, this is something I've been speaking about a lot recently because emerging risks is a bit of a passion project for me. So obviously, I've explained my background, and I think COVID and what we went through then was probably about as bad as it gets. It pretty much destroyed the industry globally. It was protected in the UK, but there was still a horrific knock-on effect. So I guess another pandemic's a possibility, and I would flag that as one of the major risks. We've seen the back of COVID for now, but I don't think anyone should think that the chances of that happening again are zero. I hope not, but anyway, I think for me, it's technology. So virtual production, virtual reality, extended reality, AI, these are serious threats because they touch everything. Cyber threats obviously increase exponentially as these types of technologies become more integrated, and that's 99% reliant on the Unreal Engine, which is, for any of you that know or don't know, it's a very powerful design tool, and it's used to build essentially photorealistic 3D virtual environments, and it was originally developed for video games like GTA and the like. So if you've got a production and they're all using, it's using virtual production, all of its assets are essentially digital, and therefore a lot of your production becomes digital, and that's open to attack. Ransomware, malware, for example, or error, and that error is going to come from a glitch in the system, or so digital some kind of tech error or a human error. That basically brings everything crashing down, and you can't film. Plus, it's a big machine with loads of wires and leads, and that generates heat. The thing can burst into flames. Virtual production. One of the unforeseen side effects. I know it was on where it happened, but people can experience motion sickness and that type of stuff, and they end up missing days of filming, and so it's all up for grabs. Then we've got, content manipulation, misinformation, deep fakes, for want of another word. So, the growth of deep fake technology is frightening. It basically means that producers just need to be really careful about verifying the authenticity of what they're looking at, certainly before they air it, and ensure that it doesn't, contribute to the spread of false information. This advance in technology, it spirals. I mean, it can increase intellectual property infringement. So productions need to be more vigilant, ensure they've got the correct clearances in place, before they upload something into a virtual production volume that they don't actually have the rights to. You've got increased environmental risks. So, producers, I know, especially over here in the UK with BAFTA, and it's fantastic initiatives, right? But the producers are under massive amounts of scrutiny and regulatory pressure to adopt sustainable practices and minimise their environmental footprint. So I'd also flag supply chain disruptions. I mean, we're seeing this with stuff going on in the Middle East and Russia, and where equipment can't get through, or something's broken and it needs to go somewhere to be fixed, and it increases the delay in getting that specific part, or so producers really need to properly assess ahead of time and risk manage to ensure that their schedules reactive. I think for us, I mean, the important thing when building the team, what I've tried to do is make sure that we've got a balance of seasoned property, loss adjusters that understand the process and are able to, apply themselves technically. But we're also, the team are also comprised of ex-industry professionals. So we've got producers, ex-producers, we've got production accountants, and so on. So, we've built a team that understands the industry that it works within or aligns to, and our job is to be as proactive as we are reactive. So, we can get ahead of the curve and we can provide assistance with all stages, pre-production, event planning, to really try and kind of iron out the risks and get ahead of them with the production and the events teams. We work with a lot of third-party experts, for example, experts in crisis management, injury prevention, public relations, etc., to ensure that we're providing a real kind of bespoke 360-degree solution, and I suppose most importantly that it's fit for purpose. So in the UK, we sit within the specialty division of Sedgwick, and that's pretty amazing because we're able to pool our resources, basically combine forces. God forbid, in the event of a major or technically complicated loss. So, for example, suppose a studio is forced to shut down mid-production because they suddenly discover asbestos. So our environmental team, for example, can react really quickly. They can assess the risk and then work alongside us to ensure that the production can mitigate as quickly as they can and get back to filming, as safely as possible. Same for cyber. They can be deployed in the event of a cyber attack, and we've also got, the assistance of construction and engineering, major complex loss, marine, aviation, and so on and so on. So for me, that's the fantastic thing about Sedgwick and what we're able to offer as a media and entertainment team. We're really so much more than the sum of our parts, and essentially we've got the right people with the right knowledge that can be deployed at the right time anywhere in the world.
Well, this is so interesting, and we're very pleased to obviously have you as part of the Sedgwick team and all the resources that this group brings. So if our listeners are interested, of course, they can always visit sedgwick.com and find out more about how to get in touch, how to utilize these resources and tap into our great resource, our experts such as you, Alex. Self-serving, hey, there's always the Sedgwick podcast, which is going to be available and free for people to listen to. But so we'll just have you on every week and keep producing content.
Sure, I'll add it to my diary.
But no, we appreciate your time, and we just want to thank everybody again for listening. And until the next show, everyone have a great week.